Greetings, nerds and virgins. We're here for another Colby Covington main event. This is on the Moneyline. I'm Newsome. We're here for UFC 272. We've got a good card ahead of us. Just very quickly though, in regards to Base AI, the UFC prediction software, as always, I will be putting out a separate video onto YouTube just with a bit of a recap from the last event at UFC Vegas 49, so make sure you check that out. But straight into the breakdowns. Main event, Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal, a grudge match, two fighters that used to be friends, two fighters that used to train very close together. They used to live together and now they absolutely hate each other. You know, there's a lot of animosity there that you'll be able to find the background story on that on the internet if you do want to research it. But in regards to the fight itself, Colby Covington's a 3-1 favourite in this fight, and it's easy to see why. Jorge Masvidal obviously poses problems from a striking perspective. He's got power, he's got cardio, he can go 5 rounds. And listen, if we see Jorge Masvidal knock Colby out, I don't think anybody would be shocked, but I just think it's a very low percentage outcome. I think Colby Covington's pace, his cardio, his wrestling, the ability to be relentless and just keep a hold of his opponents. Like, for example, we saw against Robbie Lawler, and Colby Covington actually put out a high number of strikes in regards to volume in that fight, but it was the wrestling, the constant takedowns that really just threw Lawler off. Even though Lawler's a dangerous striker with power himself, he just couldn't get his way into the fight because of the relentless wrestling from Colby, and I see exactly the same thing happening here. Like I said, these guys were friends, they were training partners, and they're going to know where each other's good, they're going to know where each other's deficient, and they're going to know what's happened in regards to those wrestling exchanges, because that's where I believe that this fight is going to be won and lost. I actually think Colby's striking's got a lot better. We saw that against Usman, even though Usman's striking's astronomically improved as well. And Colby Covington stood with him and had some good moments there. So I don't think Colby Covington's going to be completely out of his depth striking with Jorge Masvidal, although I would still give the slight striking edge to Masvidal. I do think that when it comes to the takedowns and the wrestling, I think Masvidal will be able to defend some takedowns when he is taken down. I think he will be able to get back up to his feet at times as well. But over 5 rounds, the course of 5 rounds, 25 minutes, I do think that it's going to get to a point where enough's enough. I think Colby Covington will continue with the takedowns. He will stick to it. He's got the cardio, the pace and the pressure to be able to have that sort of game plan. And I think it is going to go 5 rounds. I think it is going to go 25 minutes. And I think Colby's going to win at least 3 out of the 5 rounds. We might even end up looking at a 50-45 here just because of that wrestling. So I'm picking Colby Covington to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fun one between Edson Barboza and we've got the return of Bryce Mitchell. Now, this fight's really interesting from the Bryce Mitchell perspective because Mitchell in his last fight against Andre Fili, you know, we remember that as dominant, but if you actually go back and watch that fight, Bryce Mitchell dominated in round 1, but then he dropped round 2 badly. His activity levels dropped off. Andre Fili was piecing him up on the feet. He had him moving backwards. Andre Fili was defending the takedowns. And at that moment, I mean, I bet on Andre Fili as a relatively sized underdog in that fight. So at that moment, I'm thinking, when this gets into round 3, I've won my bet, I've cashed my bet. But then Bryce Mitchell just found something in that 3rd round. He was able to then take Fili down again, and it's almost like round 2 never happened. So with Edson Barboza, it's a little bit of a different animal here because even though Andre Fili's good, Edson Barboza's got much better striking than Fili. I don't think Barboza's jiu-jitsu is as good as Fili's, but I definitely think Barboza's takedown defense is going to stand up in this fight for some moments. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Obviously on the feet, Barboza is by far the better striker. And there's 2 big gaps in skill in this fight. Barboza's striking, I think, is much better than Bryce Mitchell's. But if Mitchell gets on top, that jiu-jitsu that Mitchell has is much greater than the defensive jiu-jitsu of Barboza. So this fight is going to play out one of 2 ways. Either Barboza's going to be able to defend the takedowns and he's going to light Mitchell up and probably finish him late in the fight, or Mitchell is going to have some success with the takedowns. And the big problem for Edson Barboza is, although he's got good takedown defense, once he is actually on his back and he gets his opponent in guard, he just stays on his back for long periods of time, and that's a big issue against somebody like Bryce Mitchell because Mitchell will roll on top. His topside jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. His submission game's good as well. And if Barboza settles on his back, then Mitchell's going to win the round, in my opinion, from that moment. So if Mitchell gets those takedowns early, then Barboza's in trouble. I actually think that with what we saw against Andre Fili, Bryce Mitchell can be relentless. And that's important in this fight, that relentless wrestling, because if Michal doesn't get Barboza down within the first couple of takedowns, he's not going to give up. It's not going to damage his morale, and he'll just keep trying till he gets that takedown. And I think once he gets one takedown and Barboza realizes that he got stuck on his back, I think the next round, or if he does get back up to his feet, then Michal will be able to get another takedown. And the more Michal starts shooting takedowns, the more success he's going to have. And that's where I feel that this fight is going to be won and lost. You've just got to ask yourself the question, is Bryce Mitchell going to get 2 takedowns in this fight in 2 different rounds? I think he does. And because of that, because of Barboza's willingness to be settled on his back, I think that gives Bryce Mitchell big advantages in this fight. Obviously, if Bryce Mitchell doesn't take him down, then he's going to get lit up. But like I said, the question you ask yourself, is Mitchell going to score a takedown in more than one round? I think he does, and for that reason, I'm picking Bryce Mitchell to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira. Kevin Holland, a big favourite in this fight. I'm not quite sure I agree with the money line. I think it's way too wide. And the reason being is, I just feel that both of these fighters are quite hard to trust. Now, I think Kevin Holland is rightfully the favourite. Like I said, I just don't agree with how wide the betting line is. But the reason why I think Holland's rightfully favoured regardless is because I do think he's harder to trust against a higher level of competition, where with Alex Oliveira, you just do not know what fighter you're going to get on the night inside the cage. And that, like I say, it's just really, really hard to trust. From a skill set perspective, I could absolutely see Oliveira come into this fight and take Kevin Holland down and do good work on top. But then again, Kevin Holland seems to have a lot of his problems against the top 10 in the division, the top 5 in the division, whereas Alex Oliveira just isn't that. I think on the feet, striking, Oliveira does pose some problems, but Kevin Holland's length, his reach, his speed, his movement, I do think he has an edge in all those areas. So, like I said, that's why I can see that Kevin Holland's favoured in this fight. But should Alex Oliveira be a plus 230 underdog? I don't think so. Like I said, I think it should be closer, but regardless, as I've already mentioned, the speed, the movement, the striking abilities of Kevin Holland should be enough to just rack up volume against Alex Oliveira. If Oliveira does get takedowns, then I think he's going to be made to work for them. And then the cardio issues are a little bit of a red flag from an Oliveira perspective as well. So in the grand scheme of things, the line should be closer, but I do think Kevin Holland has edges in enough areas in this fight to win. I'm picking Kevin Holland to win this fight. And in the next fight, we're in the heavyweight division. We've got Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. Again, this is another fight that should have happened a couple of weeks ago, but it's been pushed back to this card. And it's another one of those fights where there's 2 very obvious outcomes here. So from Sergey Spivak's perspective, if he gets takedowns in this fight and gets on top of Greg Hardy will get stuck on his back. Sergey Spivak will roll and he'll probably submit him. And I don't think that if Spivak takes Hardy down, Hardy will get back up without being submitted either. You know, I think there's a big gap in skill there. But on the flip side, Greg Hardy is athletic on the feet. He's quick himself. He's powerful. If he just lands something on Sergey Spivak and knocks Spivak out, then again, fight over. And I do feel that that's a relatively easy path to victory for Greg Hardy as well, especially if Spivak comes in. He's going to be the slightly smaller fighter. He's not going to be as strong, so he might want to try and clinch up first with Hardy to try and wear him down a little bit. And to clinch up, he's got to close the distance. When you close the distance, that's when you meet explosive Hardy. So again, just justifying that Greg Hardy path to victory, I think it's a little bit more than a puncher's chance here. I do think that the style of Spivak means that he's got to get close to Hardy, and getting close to Hardy is going to put him in danger. But like I say, if he does get Hardy down, I think Hardy's done. I think he'll get submitted or he'll lose via ground and pound. Like I said, I don't think he'll get back up to his feet. So looking at the 2, I think Hardy being the bigger underdog, I think this is the heavyweight division. Power normally means much more danger than wrestling and a submission game, especially with Hardy being the bigger, stronger, physical, more athletic fighter as well. I am going to side with the underdog in Greg Hardy. Like I've already mentioned a couple of times, if he does get taken down, then he's probably going to get blown out of the water. But I'm going to side with him, keeping the fight on the feet in the early moments and catching Spivak coming in and closing the distance whilst he's trying to implement his game plan. I'm picking Greg Hardy to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jalin Turner versus Jamie Mullarkey. A really good fight, really good matchmaking, both fighters that have been on really good form. Jamie Mullarkey, he's showing that knockout power now in the UFC, coming off back-to-back knockouts. Weirdly, on the other side, Jalin Turner, tall, long, southpaw striker, known for his striking. He's actually coming off 2 back-to-back submission wins, showing that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu improvement that he's making. Trains at Carlson Gracie, he's a brown belt in Jiu-Jitsu, so very capable on the mat. It's just we haven't seen it until his last couple of fights that, like I said, he's finished back-to-back submissions. So I think it's a difficult fight for Jamie Mullarkey, especially with now we're having a crowd inside the arena, which means the bigger cage. I think it gives Jalin Turner a little bit more room to work, more space as well, because what Mullarkey is a dogfighter, which means he'll come forward, he'll be aggressive, he'll try to get in the face of his opponents and just make things dirty, ugly, gritty, and then ultimately try and knock his opponent out in a wild exchange in boxing range. But with Jalin Turner, he can fight well moving backwards, which is really important. And like I said, he's longer. He's a southpaw striker. With this being southpaw versus orthodox, the straight punches are going to be a bigger weapon. And that's pretty much all Jalin Turner throws in regards to his strikes. There's no winging hooks or anything. Everything's nice, tight, clean, crisp, and straight down the middle. So I think from a stylistic perspective, you know, Jamie Mullarkey's done well in his last previous fights. But I do think stylistically this fight does slightly favour Jalin Turner, who's got physical advantages and he's going to have the bigger cage as well. If Mullarkey does look for the takedowns, we've seen Mullarkey swept, reversed on the mat. I think Turner is absolutely a better grappler than, for example, Faraz Ziam, who did sweep Jamie Mullarkey. So again, that's just another angle there as well. If Mullarkey comes in here and knocks Jalin Turner out, I'm not going to be surprised. Jalin Turner has been knocked out a few times. Mullarkey's got a lot of knockouts on his record, but outside of that knockout, I think Jalin Turner's going to be controlling the greater parts of this fight for the longer periods, and I think he's got multiple ways of finishing. I think he could knock Mullarkey out. I think if it hits the mat, another submission wouldn't shock me, and if it goes to a decision, the volume difference is crazy in this fight. Jalin Turner racks up more than 6 strikes per minute on average, which is a high average, and Jamie Mullarkey's less than half than that. So again, if it goes to a decision, the volume should be on the side of Turner. I'm picking Jalin Turner to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Marina Rodriguez versus Xiaonan Yan. And again, a very interesting fight. I think the betting line again is massively off. I don't think Yan should be anywhere close to a 2-1 underdog in this fight. I think the line should be much closer. I do kind of understand to an extent why Marina Rodriguez would be favoured, but it's going to be a close fight in my opinion because of the way that Yan fights. Yan likes to get in close, she likes to be aggressive. The technique aspect of the striking absolutely is on the side of Rodriguez, but Xiaonan Yan just makes fights dirty, ugly, gritty. She'll get in the face of her opponent. And we've seen Rodriguez, not completely, but we have seen her eat strikes. We have seen her drop rounds with striking. So it's not as if her striking's at some super crazy elite level that she's just going to absolutely wipe through somebody like Xiaonan Yan. Yan's going to be competitive in this fight. She's got volume. She's got durability. She can make fights ugly. And I'll give you a clean example of what I do think that this fight could look like. If you look at last week, we've got Kim versus Kelleher, and now that fight was a bad decision. Absolutely, you know, Kim won that fight for me. But the reason Kelleher actually took that fight on all 3 judges' scorecards was because of that aggression, because she was trying to finish the fight, because she was just trying to stick anything on her opponent and just landing raw volume and just being wild inside the cage. The judges love fighters that get in the face of other opponents, that scrap and are looking to win at all times. And that actually describes Xiaonan Yan in this fight. I'm actually siding with the underdog here. I think although Rodriguez is the more technical striker, I think she's going to be on the back foot more often than not, which again is not going to be a good look to the judges. And Yan will just be in the face. She's not got to deal with somebody like Carla Esparza that she fought last time out, looking to try and wrestle her and grapple her. She's going to have a fight she likes. I think Yan's going to have the ability to shine in a couple of rounds at least in this fight. I'm siding with the underdog. I'm picking Xiaonan Yan to win this fight. And in the next fight, I can't believe somebody thought it was a good idea to put these 2 fighters together. You know, I feel quite bad that I'm having to pronounce both of their names. The commentary is going to have a horrendous time of this on the night as well. We've got Negumereanu versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. And like I say, I hope I don't have to say this too many times. I'll keep this short and sweet. I think that Kennedy Nzechukwu is going to be the fighter that's more likely to be the round winner here. And I don't think we're going to see a finish in this fight. Although Negumereanu has finished his last 2 fights and looked good in doing so, I think Nzechukwu's on a different level to those guys. I'm not saying Nzechukwu's at an elite level or, you know, close to being ranked or anything like that. I just think he's a better fighter than Ike Villanueva. And I do think that it's going to show in this fight. I think Nzechukwu is going to be able to keep his distance. Again, the bigger cage is the taller, longer, rangier fighter. I think he's going to be able to strike on the back foot. I think Negumereanu is going to try and struggle to take him down. Nzechukwu can be taken down, but he's also got an 80% takedown defense statistic as well, so he's going to be difficult to take down at the same time. The thing is with Nzechukwu is he's a slow starter. We've seen that in his last couple of fights, and Negumereanu probably will take that first round, or it might make that first round close, but the longer this fight goes on, the more it suits Nzechukwu. I don't think we see an early finish. I do think Nzechukwu pulls away the longer the fight goes on. I'm picking Kennedy Nzechukwu to win this fight. And in the next fight, if you think the main event's a grudge match between Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal, this is even worse. We finally get to see Marina Moroz versus Mariya Agapova. And this fight, like I said, is absolutely a grudge match. Again, do your research, go and look on the internet and see some of the things that Marina Moroz was saying about Agapova. And it was an easy fight for the UFC to make. Agapova's pissed off. She wants to get in there and absolutely knock Moroz out. And I actually think that's what we're going to see in this fight. I think from her last fight against Sabina Mazo, Agapova put on such a good performance. You can see that she's developing, that she's learned from her mistakes, that she's not rushing in and gassing herself out after one round trying to finish the fight. And even though Marina Moroz isn't a bad fighter, again, she's a fighter that's calm and composed, that likes her space, and she might get a space with this being the bigger cage. But Agapova's just so relentless with that aggression and getting into the face of her opponents. I think that Moroz will have some moments in this fight. She might rack up the volume a little bit. I don't think she's going to run away with the volume, but I think the aggression, the pressure, the fighter that's looking like they're trying to finish the fight at all times is going to be Agapova. And I think she will, or she could potentially take Moroz out, but if she doesn't take Moroz out and it does go to a decision, I can definitely see Agapova winning at least 2 out of the 3 rounds on the judges' scorecards. Like I said, go and have a look more into this fight of the things that Moroz said. It'll get you excited about the fight because Agapova is going to come in here looking to take Moroz's head off. But I do think she's learned from mistakes. She'll have a calmer approach early in this fight. And once she has Moroz hurt, she's going to be an absolute savage. I'm picking Mariya Agapova to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Umar Nurmagomedov versus Brian Kelleher. And fair play to Brian Kelleher for taking this fight. There's not going to be many fighters out there that are going to be wanting to fight Umar Nurmagomedov at this point. But unfortunately, we have seen Brian Kelleher against wrestlers before. You look at the Ricky Simone fight. Simone just took him down at will, and that's actually forced Kelleher to start using more of his wrestling in his fights. But he's going to be outmatched in the wrestling department here with Umar Nurmagomedov. And I actually don't think Nurmagomedov's a bad striker either. He's got a decent kickboxing game. Brian Kelleher could have the Hail Mary guillotine off a sloppy takedown maybe from Nurmagomedov, or he could have that puncher's chance, that flash knockout chance. But outside of that, I think Umar Nurmagomedov is a better striker. I think he's the younger, more athletic, more hungry fighter. And the biggest gap in skill here is the wrestling. I think he will be able to take Kelleher down. In regards to the top side jiu-jitsu, I don't know whether he's going to be able to keep Kelleher down, especially early on in this fight whilst they're fresh and dry. But I think the longer the fight goes on, the more takedowns Nurmagomedov will land, the more it'll damage the morale of Kelleher, and the more success he'll have with the wrestling the longer the fight goes on. I think it's going to be a tough ask for Umar Nurmagomedov to actually take Brian Kelleher out and finish him. It's a possibility, but I don't think it's a high percentage probability. I do think Nurmagomedov is going to win this fight based on the wrestling and the grappling, especially, as I've already mentioned, the longer the fight goes on. So for that reason, I'm picking Umar Nurmagomedov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ludovic Klein stepping in on short notice to fight Devonte Smith. Again, it could be an absolute banger, this fight. Ludovic Klein has lost 2 on the bounce, and I do think he's better than... I bet Trezano against Ludovic Klein at 2-1 when he fought there. I thought the fight was going to be close enough to justify a 2-1 bet. The bet cashed. A lot of people thought it was a robbery. I personally don't. I think it could have gone either way. The underdog ended up winning the fight. Then he goes in there against Nate Landwehr and he looks massively off. I think Ludovic Klein's a better fighter than what he's shown in his last 2 fights. I think against Devonte Smith can be got at. The thing is with Devonte Smith, he's a quick, explosive striker in that first round, and that's where the danger is going to be for Klein. Klein could get caught in that first round and get knocked out, and nobody would be surprised. Klein's the underdog. So again, like I said, nobody's going to be surprised. But if this fight goes into round 2 and round 3, Devonte Smith's speed, his precision and his power will all drop off a little bit naturally because of how he comes into round 1s. So Klein should be able to take the later rounds if he weathers that storm and survives the first round and doesn't get knocked out. But let's not forget that Ludovic Klein's got power in his hands. He's a southpaw fighter. He fires that head kick out really quickly. The only problem I've mentioned, this is documented, the only problem I've had with Ludovic Klein is sometimes his combinations can become a little predictable. but they fire out fast, so that's why he's able to catch his opponents. He's also got a bit of a wrestling game. His grappling, I don't think he's quite there just yet, but he can wrestle. So if he does want to break this fight up a little bit, take Smith down, allow Smith to get back up to his feet, take him down again, and just wear at that gas tank, I think Klein's got options in this fight to be able to slow the fight down and drain Smith's gas tank and power in his cardio just a little bit, and be able to win the fight down the stretch, either via a late knockout or a decision. So for that reason, I'm actually siding with the underdog. I'm picking Ludovic Klein to win this fight. And in the last fight, this is going to be a banger as well. It's the first fight of the night. I've no idea why it's so far down the card, but we've got Dustin Jacoby versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. And again, both fighters that are coming off really good wins. Michal Oleksiejczuk's one of my favourite fighters in the UFC. He's so good to watch. His striking's fluid. He's got power. He's got combinations. He's durable. He gets in the face of his opponent. But I do think that he's going to have some problems in this fight with Dustin Jacoby, who's a lifelong kickboxer, super solid on the feet. He's calm. He's composed. He's got good technique. What I love about Jacoby is he knows when to come in with power and when to just, chip away at his opponent. And that's smart striking, fight IQ. And I think that's going to be a problem for Oleksiejczuk. The problem I've got with Oleksiejczuk in this specific fight is he can get hit too much. And against another opponent like Shamil Gamzatov, I bet Oleksiejczuk as an underdog against Gamzatov. That was an easy cash. But the thing is, Gamzatov didn't pose the striking threat that what Dustin Jacoby poses. Gamzatov wasn't as technical as Jacoby. He didn't hit as hard as Jacoby. He doesn't have the cardio that Jacoby had. He wasn't a physical presence like Jacoby. So that was easy for Oleksiejczuk to get into those boxing exchanges and just get off and rip combinations. He's not going to be able to do that against Jacoby. And if he tries to, I think he's going to get cracked hard. And that's where I have the issue with Michal Oleksiejczuk. I just struggle to see Oleksiejczuk knocking Jacoby out, and I just struggle for him to seeing him get the striking off, the volume off for 2 out of the 3 rounds if it goes to a decision as well. The fight's going to be played out on the feet. I think that's where Jacoby's better and has the edges in the speed, in the technique, and he's got power to go along with that as well. So I'm picking Dustin Jacoby to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast for the UFC 272 pay-per-view with grudge matches everywhere. The fight card is phenomenal in my opinion on paper. I can't wait to watch it. I hope you all enjoyed the podcast and the breakdowns. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again next week.